Before we get to the fan theories and everything else about Scorpius and the fan films, let's talk about real quick from the original video footage of the featurette about how I made the puppet for him in time for the first movie. If you could recall, the way how I did the Scorpius puppet was, well, it was kind of basic. All I just did was print out what I actually did use from a photograph of Scorpius that I downloaded off the internet when Google searching Power Ranger villain video photos off of like Google or Yahoo or something. And if you like type in like Google up Scorpius Power Rangers, you'll get an image result. But the image result being the same Scorpius image I used earlier in part 1 of the video. And all I just did was just print out a full scale image of Scorpius from the TV show to make the puppet off the mount board. And that's all I did. But then also to add some cool sort of 3D effects, I actually used one of my glitter glue pens, which were Elmer brand based, I think, whatever I know. One of my older metallic glitter pens to, make it look like Scorpius was like covered in that oozy insect slime that the character is known for, and even like all around the tentacles. And the tentacles were actually made of the same poster board material that I used for the Trecheron puppet back in my Morphin Grid case study featurette for Trecheron. And that's how I created the Scorpius puppet, because it took me a long time to even wanted to do a paper puppet or mount board paper doll of Scorpius in time for these movies. Now let's get on to the fan theories. One of my biggest fan theory contrivances that I ever had about Scorpius, that if he were ever, like thinking back to when we had the season 20 years ago, one of my biggest pet peeve fan theories I've had about Scorpius when looking back on the season was that I just wish that Scorpius, well, despite that he appeared in the series looking in his rough and rugged insect, spider, scorpion type form, I just wish that earlier on into the season, I just think Scorpius should have been presented first in his human form before seeing him what we know of him in the 21 episodes he had appeared in Lost Galaxy. But I just must wonder, what did Scorpius looked like long before he was even that, giant spider, octopus, scorpion looking thing that he is, albeit. Even though, when I look at Scorpius' design and aesthetic, I don't think he looks more like a scorpion. He has somewhat the body type of a scorpion, but why do I have a feeling his tentacles are more like octopus arms, octopus tentacles with a spider's head and also a spider's head and also body, and somewhat a scorpion tail, which we barely see from the character. Like the only time we ever see Scorpius's tail when like ever was wrapped around when he grabbed Kai in Heir to the Throne, when Scorpius had a battle with the Power Rangers at the warehouse district of Terra Venture. And that was the only time we ever saw the back tentacle of Scorpius, because he's based on the Scorpion constellation of all the space constellations of, like even in the Sentai that has an Orange Ranger that's themed after a Scorpion, pretty much so. And I was just thinking another fan theory. If Q Ranger, the Sentai that I'm going to use as partial influence for Power Rangers Lost Galaxy Infinite Frontier, would it be possible that if Hasbro will ever adapt Q Ranger for Power Rangers, will they make the Orange Scorpion Ranger from Q Ranger, if ever in Power Rangers continuity context, would have the Orange Scorpion Ranger make a throwback to Scorpius from Lost Galaxy? Just think about it. Because in the Sentai of Uchu Sentai Q Ranger, the Orange Ranger is based on a Scorpius constellation, so maybe he can be a hereditary reference to Scorpius, but if he was a Ranger. And also my fan theory continues about in terms of why Scorpius is the only parent to Trachina, and knowing this franchise, like discussed back in the Magda Defender videos last time, that I just wish that Scorpius actually had his wife known and told to Trachina, because knowing the franchise and knowing Power Rangers, parents are how come Scorpius is like the only one that's parenting Trachina, and knowing to the fact that Scorpius pretty much had a wife? And like I discussed back in the Redux of the Magda Defender videos, if, like, for instance, with Magda Defender with his situation, if Scorpius has Trachina, then who is Trachina's mother and who is his wife. And that's something that Power Rangers never really elaborated on, like in the TV show. I guess maybe one day eventually, if Boom Studios will ever do comics of all the other seasons, once they've done with the Mighty Morphin stories for the Boom Comics continuity, and once they get past through Zeo through space, and if they ever do any Lost Galaxy comics, I would love to see how they would have elaborated more on Scorpius and Trakena's as characters, and in terms of their family relationship, and wonder what Trakena's mother would have looked like. Was Trakena's mother as human as her, or was Trakena's mother just as ugly and an ugly alien insect like her father Scorpius? Maybe, I guess. And then also the little fan theory connection, which was probably where I got my sources wrong, that thinking back to a particular Mighty Morphin villain like Scorpina, who works for Rita in most of the first season of the franchise until early season 2, until she was gone. Scorpina, no, it wouldn't really make sense having Scorpina being Trakena's mother, because Scorpina had already left Power Rangers in the season 2 episode Goldar's Vice Versa, and Scorpina was Mighty Morphin era, so someone human looking with the insect theme behind that character could have been Trakena's mother and Scorpius' wife. But I just wish they could have elaborated more upon that in the series, because that's another common thing about with most of the villains in Power Rangers. Well, only the following prominent villains, like I discussed before. Rita and Rito, Master Vile being their father, but, well, in the Boom comics and the Go-Go comics of Go-Go Power Rangers by Boom Studios, we get to know who Rita's mother is. But in Lost Galaxy, and even to a degree with Time Force, with Rancic, with Rancic and Nadira, and then Super Mega Force with Vrock and Vikar, we never get to know who the heck the mother was of Trakena, as well as Scorpius being married at some point, and how the hell did Trakena was brought up to be. Same could be implied about Rancic, who is the main villain of Time Force, and also Nadira is his father. But, we know Nadira has a father, being Rancic, but who the heck is Nadira's mother? Same could be said about, again, Vrock and Prince Vikar in Megaforce. Although Emperor Mavro is their father, but I can't say Lavira, despite her voice actress sounding like an older woman, could have been, Lavira could have been Vikar and Vrock's mother, but that wouldn't make no sense, right? Okay. But Scorpius, for some reason, also kind of reminds me of, for a Power Rangers villain of his kind and kin from 20 years ago in Lost Galaxy, when I think of Scorpius and thinking about him ruling an alien insect army who's on the verge of wanting the Quasar Sabers and stuff and defeating the Power Rangers while on Terra Venture, he reminds me a lot of a mafia family. If Scorpius and Trakena were a mafia family, where Scorpius, albeit would be the mafia leader of a father, and Trakena is the mafia leader father's daughter, and the Stingwingers were the backup, henchmen of the mafia empire that Scorpius rules. Because actually, I kind of did have vibes of how Scorpius would hire these generals and henchmen to take out the Power Rangers on Terra Venture, and knowing Scorpius just wants to keep an eye on Trakena so that way she would be kept safe by him, but knowing that Scorpius, powerful and evil he is, but although he didn't really do much in the series until his only time he ever stood toe-to-toe against the Rangers. But, that's one of the things, again, why I never really cared for the character, but I just wish there was more to him in the series than we ended up getting from him 20 years ago. Because I just wish that if he was more interesting, then maybe, if he was, let's say, if Scorpius was a human villain, like his daughter in main Power Rangers continuity, then that would have been, I would have found Scorpius a more compelling thing. And also another common thing I find out, that's very, one of the common things that I find about the franchise in terms of villains is that, for the last 25 plus years I've been watching Power Rangers, I've started to notice a lot of things about the villains in the franchise. It seems to me that when we have these Lancillary, monster static face villains, they hardly ever get to do anything interesting before they get offed off, and then they just, get treated like crap and get the stick in the mud in the franchise. But when you have a human-looking villain, then they have more complexity to the series' overall narrative, and which Trakina being one of. But again, when we have monster costumed villains, they don't really have much interesting going on with them. They just happen to do some things interesting, but a lot of the time, it doesn't really impact the series as much. I mean, it was common with Lord Zed or villains like Ecliptor and Darkonda in Space, or Deviant and Villamax in this season, or Frax and Time Force, or Zenaku and Wild Force, or Vexicus, or any of the other monster suited villains in Ninja Storm, so forth, or Zeltrax and Dino Thunder, etc. But it's common that Power Rangers has this thing where the human looking villains, like again with Trakina, can do more interesting things as a character because she at least is a human looking character, and then later on a costume suited mutant looking green bug thing. But for a monster like puppet thing like Scorpius, he doesn't get much to do. And I can understand based on the hardships of, again, maneuvering his puppet, his arms and puppet on set for the Scorpius Stinger set, according to that Morphin Network interview with Amy Roll again, that if Scorpius was more convincing, if Scorpius was a human-looking villain like Trakina, then I would have liked him a lot more for Lost Galaxy's Rogue Gallery of Villains. But instead, Scorpius had to come out the way he did because Saban, right? Whatever. Now, on to the fan films of my Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film series. Scorpius did appear briefly, and I mean briefly, in the fan films, because despite how much I don't really care much about the character, but Scorpius did had a brief scene in my first Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film from 2014.
So, you swear to make the Power Rangers pay? Then make them pay. You may have failed. In spite of your failures, I have decided to send someone to deal with the Rangers. Let me guess. That mantis-headed henchwoman of yours. Is that who you were referring to? And she's going to take over my place? And what she does, she will bring on reckoning upon Terraventure and make the Power Rangers pay. It's too late now, Metarex. Your time was up. Now, it's our turn for us Insectoids to rise again.
Although he did get a brief scene that I added in my recent extended edition cut of my first movie. Check it out on my channel if you haven't. And Scorpius meets my OC main villain of the first movie from 5 years ago, that Dark Edgelord villain by the name of Lord Metarex. And you should check it out for yourself. But here's a little quick quip of Scorpius meeting my OC in the extended version for the beginning of the film, as opposed to that post-credits ending that you know in both the regular and the extended versions.
Long time no see, Metarex. You don't want me to succeed with my plans of conquest, do you? Good luck trying taking over the universe. But you should know that my race is more superior than your being. I don't care what you say. My mission will be done. You have better.
He did, however, appeared in the Rise of Trakina, Wrath of Trakina film and the serials. Okay, but in terms of his appearance in Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, The Wrath of Trakina, Scorpius's relationship with Trakina is very controversial to change because
I bet one of you or all of you have Trakina in your hands, under your possession.
You're crazy. I don't know who you're talking about. I seriously don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, but you are being delusional and you're being crazy. We didn't do anything to Trakina or who she is, or for that matter.
Okay, let's talk about it a little bit before we wrap this up. You see, I've discussed this back in my vlog and stuff about the Wrath of Trakina earlier, if you haven't seen my vlog for the film and about the changes. If you haven't noticed about the changes between Scorpius and Trakina in this film, in this film, compared to in the actual Power Rangers, the Prime universe of the franchise, I kind of didn't want to go with, in my fan fiction, fan film, reimagined, alternate universe, what you like to say, version. I didn't want to make Scorpius and Trakina father and daughter in this version of the series for the fan films, because, and you know how much of an ignorant jerk of a Power Rangers fan I am for changing the characters' relation. It would make no worse if I made, let's say, Scorpius and Trakina, you know, siblings, like if Scorpius was Trakina's older brother and Trakina was Scorpius's younger sister or something, but then it would be a little too similar to a particular Hasbro franchise film who did something similar with two particular villains in mind, and that happened once in that film. But for some reason, I just didn't want to do Scorpius and Trakina father and daughter because of my personal distaste of how Scorpius treated Trakina in the series. But of course, you know, Trakina is meant to be a spoiled daddy's girl who would later become a warrior, a spoiled princess of a such, but then follow her destiny to become the swordswoman and prove that she can fight alongside her father. You know, that was part of the character's motive and, character's motive. But I decided to change that in my fan film series because knowing that was just not appropriate. And I think that's one of the common controversial criticisms that nobody has pointed out about my fan film yet. If you haven't seen it, check it out for yourself. And then give me your feedback on that somewhere in the comments on either this or in the films that are on my channel right now. But like, for some reason, I kind of didn't want to do that because I felt it would be a rinse and repeat of what's already established in main continuity, because it go to show I kind of did ruin Scorpius and Trakina's characters in an essence, and Scorpius in general, because Scorpius was a boring villain and knowing Trakina was the more interesting of the bunch. And out of all of Lost Galaxy's villains, that's why I felt Trakina, I feel in my theory of watching the series, what if Lost Galaxy only had Trakina as the main villain and none of the other villains were really all over in the series? I mean, maybe you can, like, say, keep Villamax and Deviat with Trakina, but get rid of Scorpius, Furio, and Trecheron. And I think what the actual series did was great and fine and all, but it's just a lot of, like I said, discuss about monster villains versus human-looking villains. Monster villains don't really have much to offer to the series' narrative, while human-looking villains get to do all the interesting, great things for the series. But for some reason, Scorpius just never, impacted me a lot. I get he was just there as the main big bad who wanted the Quasar Sabers and such, but he just didn't really have much to offer for the villains other than, we see Terra Venture, and there's a team of Power Rangers. I'm going to send them my general to destroy the Power Rangers, steal their Quasar Sabers, blah, blah, blah. But, all that jazz. But I just feel like Scorpius could have been more contriving if he was a human-looking villain like Ransik or Master Org or Lothor, any of the other human-looking villains, like Daishi and Camille even. For him to be a puppet villain, that's why he was so boring. And I just feel like, as a fan of Lost Galaxy for 20 years, I just wish Trakina didn't have Scorpius as a father looking like a puppet, a spider-scorpion puppet, if he was a more human, half human, half insect hybrid, like his only daughter in the franchise and in all of history of Power Rangers. But anyway, in the fan film of Wrath of Trakina's case, I feel like now I'm going to regret changing Trakina and Scorpius from being father and daughter to, I'm going to regret this, but it wouldn't feel right having them in main universe with knowing they were never husband and wife or whatever in the original stuff. Because the reason why I did that in my current iteration of Power Rangers Lost Galaxy for the fan films is because, Trakina doesn't have a mother. You see, I felt like with the way how she looked, you see, if Trakina and Scorpius was like Mondo and Machina of the Machina Empire as king and queen, that would have been different. But I think based on how the people behind the show and all of the franchise and canon made Trakina be the daughter of Scorpius because she acted spoiled and, isolated and being coddled too much until she got irritated, and also putting her beauty all in her focus and stuff, and then, her dealing with, daddy holding her, at bay and not letting her do stuff, since she's at the point where she's old enough to do things now, and yet, see, that's one of the things I don't like about Scorpius. But the fan films, however, I should have never changed Scorpius and Trakeena's characters, and maybe, I guess, for the upcoming Power Rangers Legacy Universe fan film reboot of Lost Galaxy, I will try to reiterate Trakeena and Scorpius' characters back to their original Prime Universe counterparts, but expand more on what their characters could have been, possibly, I guess, or I don't know. And when I do the PRLU reboot of Lost Galaxy, Scorpius will be exactly what I had in mind based on my fan theory recently in this video. That being a half human, half insect hybrid, and I guess I had the proper actor in mind, fan cast actor in mind, to be Scorpius for that, and of that, Thanos himself. But I'll get to that eventually. So in final thoughts, Scorpius, like I've discussed many times before, he's not really all that contriving of a villain, and I just wish there was more to him than just, what we got from him. Because it's like, of all the villains from Lost Galaxy, Furio, yeah, he was boring. He was like a low-rate Goldar. Trecheron was better, but he wasn't offering much to do during his tenure other than, seek the lights of Ryan until he got accused of stealing the lights and using it for his own greedy treachery. That's why his name is Trecheron, because his name means treachery and deceit. Whereas, Scorpius didn't, really had no worse to offer because, he just didn't have much to do in the series. But, however, that's one of the reasons why Trakeena, was the only villain in Lost Galaxy and also the only human-looking villain to actually do things, even though she didn't really do a lot until mostly around the latter half of the season, such as when she stole the pink Quasar Saber from Corone and Protect the Quasar Saber, and also in the finale when she merged with Deviant and so forth, and the rest of that, about her Jizz and Jazz story as a tenure as a villain. But in the fan films, however, I did no worse with Scorpius, and I just felt that maybe I just didn't want to. I know that if I were to go back in time and did the films over, but no, the 2010s at the time this video's recording is almost over, and I just feel like going back into the 2010s where I was doing these films, where I was kind of harking off the nostalgia for Lost Galaxy big time beat for beat, but doing it for all the wrong reasons. Maybe I should have just excised Scorpius out of the entire canon for the fan films versus based on what I know from Prime Power Rangers continuity, and just only have Trakeena as the main villain. Or my personal theory when I was working on my first movie was, what if Trakeena was Lord Metarex the whole time? But we'll get to speaking of what's his name eventually. So since I got Scorpius out of the next time the Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan films featurette reduxes and such return, I will briefly discuss more on my OC villain that is right in front of you, that is basically based on something specific from another franchise, that Dark Edgelord villain that sucked so darn much that he didn't do much. But come back next time when we discuss my OC villain that didn't have much of an impact on my first movie. That's why I did the first movie what I did. But anyway, look no further to the leader of the Zeon Empire himself next time with Lord Metarex.